Hey folks, and welcome back to Glenn and Adrian's Rock Talk. That's Adrian.
And that's Glenn.
And as some of you know, we did a video about a week ago that featured Keith Emerson on the day of his 80th birthday. It just kind of went through what his impact was on popular music back when he was around, especially with the band ELP, but just in general. So today we're actually going to look at Greg Lake, also part of ELP, who happened to pass away the same year that Emerson did in 2016. Greg passed of pancreatic cancer. He was in not just ELP, but also King Crimson, the first couple of albums. And that first one, of course, is a stone cold classic. There's things on there I don't even know how to describe, really, except that they're highly influential. It was pretty original for the time, and may take a while to surpass. He did have a long-standing impact on the music business, and we are going to take a look at a few clips today. Some where he's talking about his work with ELP, in particular, pictures at an exhibition, and we're also going to take a look at his song, I Believe in Father Christmas, which I think may get regularly interpreted as something that it's not. And it's really the commercialization of Christmas as opposed to just being some silly Christmas song that somebody came up with to cash in or something. And we're actually going to also look at a clip from Ian Anderson saying that this was the transformation he went through with that song. What we're going to look at actually is going to be a version with Ian Anderson accompanying Greg Lake. So with all of that, I thought we would start perhaps with Greg Lake talking in 2013. He's on a cruise, it looks like. Wait a minute, Moody Blues cruise. He talks about pictures at an exhibition a little bit in a question-answer with a fan. It takes a little time for him to discuss it, but I think it really says a lot about what he does for the group, or what he did for the group. Anyway, we're going to take a look at that. So Adrian, any thoughts ahead before we dive into this one?
Greg Lake talks to the audience and not the wind this time.
That's right.
It's a King Crimson.
Let's go ahead and take a look at this, and we'll discuss as needed. I'll try not to stop it. Let's go ahead and take a look.
It's a little unusual, really, for me to be, talking without having the music around me, because in the show that you'll come and see later, I hope, you'll see that we mix the music up really together with a lot of stories. And I'm a child. You all look too young to me, but I'm a child who was born in the age of shared music. And what I mean by shared music is that, when I was young, we would buy an album. Of course, then they were vinyl, and they were big, and they had artwork. There you go. How nice of you. And we'd sit round together, and we'd listen to the music. And in some way, we would be bonded together by it. It was our expression. We understood what the music meant. In some ways, we almost lived through the music. I think some of those very big festivals like Woodstock, the Isle of Wight, California Jam, a number of them I played on. And I think it wasn't just that the fans were coming along to see a particular band. It was this sense of gathering, of belonging, of being bonded together by the music. That was the incredible feeling of the time, and it now fascinates me. When I do this show, Songs of a Lifetime, it fascinates me because, in a way, I suppose, music is a sort of tapestry that we all live our lives against. I mean, not only the music of Emerson, Lake and Palmer and King Crimson, but of course of all those great bands from that era. And we all have a kind of, thank you, and we all have a sort of a feeling through the music, and it reflects things in our lives, some of them very tragic, some of them very happy. I often get people who come up to me and say, Greg, that brain salad surgery got me through university. Stuff like that, And nowadays it gives me really a great sense of satisfaction to feel that in some way the music that I created has played some part in people's lives. It's more important to me really than the success or the money or the fame. It is the fact that music passes from soul to soul. You can't touch it, you can't see it, but you can feel it. and that has always been something very magical for me, is that, you know, I could write something or have a feeling for a song, and that could be transmitted through time and through space into someone else's soul. I will never ever get over the magic of how that works. And to me, when I write a song, it belongs to me, you know? But as soon as I put it on a record and people buy it, the song belongs to them, because that's their interpretation of what it means, you know? I think sometimes lyrics mean different things to different people. And I really mostly don't like to answer questions about lyrics, because it depends on how you feel about them, what they mean to you. It's not really up to me to say, well, this song means this or this song means that. It really depends what it means to you. But having said that, if there's anybody who would like to ask some questions, indeed about anything you like, there are three gentlemen down here on the floor with microphones, and they're like the Bee Gees, really. And if you put your hands up, if you'd like to ask a question, they'll come along with a microphone, and you can fire away. You can ask anything you want, within reason. Please go ahead.
I would like to know the most difficult song to perform that you were successfully able to perform happily for your enjoyment.
The most difficult song? Well, I suppose, you know, it's a strange thing about music, because even things that look very, very complicated, when you divide them up into little segments, they're just a succession of little segments. When you hear it all together, of course, it sounds very complicated and difficult. It's actually a wonderful lesson in life, that when you have something very complicated to do, or a challenge in front of you, if you look at it in its entirety, it's formidable. It's depressing almost. But when you start to break it down piece by piece by piece, and you accomplish each piece in succession, then all of a sudden it becomes very, very easy. And I think it's the same with any sort of, any accomplishment. It's like a magic trick. As soon as you know how to do it, it's simple. Until you know how to do it, it's impossible. And so, having said that, you know, I suppose the most difficult thing to perform was Pictures at an Exhibition, which is a classical piece by Mussorgsky. Thank you very much. You know, in ELP, we began to play it, believe it or not, as it was just as a sort of hobby, really. But when we got to rehearsals, Keith Emerson used to have the piano transcription, and he would just play it for practice. And after he used to do it every time we started to rehearse. So after a while, I used to play along with him. So now you had the bass and the piano playing Pictures and Exhibition. And after a while, Carl Palmer would join in. So now you had all three of us playing this classical music. And as each day passed, so we would learn more and more of it. And one day I remember being on stage, it was in the north of England, and we were playing the concert, and in those days we didn't have a sort of formal set list. You know, there was no list of songs. We would just call out the next song, you know, because we didn't have that many. So it would just be call out the next tune, and we'd play it. And one day, Keith looked over at me and he said, "Pictures at an Exhibition." And I said, "What?" He said, "Pete, let's play Pictures." I said, "We can't play Pictures, you know." I said, "Come on, just do it." And we just did it. And the audience just went wild, you know. And what we discovered was that up until that time, classical music had really been reserved for them what knows, you know. It was considered an elitist thing. Yeah. It was for the well-educated, you know, your people who were well-educated or wealthy, or, you know. When we played it, of course, it became accessible for everybody, for all the, you know, the kids who had turned up at the concert. Whatever their educational status or their cultural status, they could understand and enjoy, essentially, classical music. And incredible as well was that the orchestral versions started to sell in quantity as well. So what it told us was, not only did it introduce people to classical music played by a rock band, but once they liked it, they actually went out and bought the original version. I suppose it's something I'm quite proud of. I mean, we weren't the only people to use classical influences. Interestingly enough, the great Moody Blues were another band who brought classical influence into their music. You know, something that's interesting is that most rock music is based upon American music. That is to say, blues, gospel, soul music, country and western music. Most rock and roll music draws its inspiration from those basic forms of music. But in, around 1968, 69, in those days, certainly in England, it was becoming important to be original. All of the bands of that time had their own identity. I mean, you could play a record by Jimi Hendrix or The Who or the Moody Blues, and you would know within 3 seconds who you were listening to.
Yes.
Nowadays, I can listen to the end of a record, I still don't know. Because music records became products. Then they were works of art. Then
Amen.
you needed... Then you needed to be original. And of course, in all of these bands, there were these characters. Every band had its characters. Keith Moon, as I said, Jimi Hendrix, people like this. They were effervescent characters, luminous. And, so in those days, it was important to be original. And one of the things was that when the first band that I had success with was King Crimson. And
Yeah.
thank you very much. And in order to be original, we sat and we thought about it. And we thought, maybe what we should do is try and draw influence from European rather than American music. Not that I love American music and I grew up playing it. I'm actually quite good at soul music, funnily enough, You'd never know that, would you? But I am. It's because I played music from the charts when I was a kid. At one point in my youth, my repertoire consisted of 200 songs. I used to actually, when I played at my family's parties, I used to challenge them, that if they could name a song that I couldn't play, I would give them, 25 cents or whatever it was. But if I could play it, they would have to give me the same. I got rich. And, until they realized after a while. But, so I really was in touch with soul music and I love it. But my entire career has kind of shut me away from that because it's all been based on European heritage. And I'm often asked if I have regrets. People say, Greg, have you got any regrets in your career? Well, I can't really have regret. How could I possibly have a regret? I was born, a poor kid in an asbestos prefab, and I've had an incredible life. So I really and truly, I've got no regrets. Other than the small regrets that everyone has in life. It's full of ups and downs, but generally no regrets. The one big regret I've got is being cut off in a way from soul music, and it's something now that I'm not focused so much on being in a band that I'd actually like to do more of, and that's find my way back into that music because it's tremendous, and so that was it. But so really, there is this term that you will have all heard, which is progressive music. I don't like the term personally. It sounds pseudo-intellectual, progressive music. But really all it means is music that has a European rather than American influence. So I'm sorry if that was a long-winded answer to your question. That was it. Pictures at an exhibition was the most difficult part.
Okay, so Pictures at an Exhibition being the toughest piece that he's played, but he made some good points. Like things that we noticed a long time ago. We weren't really listening to ELP so much back then. I know you had brain salad surgery, and I had a record or two. It's funny, between us, we had all the ELP records just about, except Tarkus, which I just got recently, but no duplicates between us.
Yeah, I've actually got a story about that too. ELP did bring interest in classical music to many young people, myself included. A long time ago, I was over at Dad's house. I decided to play him Carnival 9 on the record player. Then he introduced me. He first played me this electronic version of The Firebird by Igor Stravinsky. And then I heard The Rite of Spring, and I was very much into classical music then, at least Stravinsky. And pretty soon to follow would be I would buy my first CD, which was Pictures at an Exhibition, conducted by Leonard Bernstein.
So the actual classical piece.
Yes.
Now, did you know at that time about the ELP version?
I don't think I did, no.
Okay, so it's just a happy coincidence, really.
Yeah.
That's funny. And he made a good point that they tend to get chopped down into little pieces that they work with. We noted that when we were listening to other bands back then, such as Genesis, the early stuff especially. If you look at something like Supper's Ready, that's really like 7 separate songs, you know.
Yeah.
And same with many of the Yes epic pieces. You know, you can break them down and they get a whole lot easier. It's more like learning a set instead of a song, you know.
Yeah. It's actually a good life skill to have, to be able to break down a task into a bunch of smaller tasks.
Yeah. Actually, I know he said something to that effect in here.
Yeah.
It was interesting to me to hear that he was really into soul music. Though
I'd like to hear. I wish I could hear Greg Lake doing some soul music. That'd be interesting to hear. Yeah, it is. The ELP version is kind of an abbreviated version of the piece, but so what? It's got lots of good stuff in it.
Right. Yeah. Well, we heard how they did it. You know, so that's not too surprising. Maybe the copy that Keith Emerson had that he was using wasn't complete. It was abridged, you know. Yeah,
well, I mean, it's kind of a long piece, too. I can understand them shortening it. There are a lot of parts that are missing, like a lot of parts of the original that are missing. But, I mean, this is a pretty good roundup, I guess, of the ideas in Pictures at an Exhibition.
Yeah, so there's a lot there, you know.
Yeah.
But like he said, all you have to do is one thing at a time. Now, the next thing that we are going to focus on is Greg's song, I Believe in Father Christmas. This is possibly his most famous song outside of ELP, and it actually does show up on some ELP compilations, just as, you know, a highlight in the mid-'70s. Late in 1974, while Regina was pregnant, Pete Sinfield and I started writing together for what would become Works Volume 1 at my house in Ascot. I had tuned the bottom string of my guitar from E down to D and started this cascading riff. It was very infectious. Couldn't get it out of my head. Then it occurred to me that the melody of Jingle Bells fit right over it. And he thought, gee, can this be a song about Christmas? So I put the idea to Pete. Neither of us liked the typical party Christmas songs, and the serious ones are rare and so hard to write. So they talked about it. They agreed Christmas had been cheapened by commercialism and that they regretted that loss of childhood innocence, as he puts it. So this seemed reason enough to make a statement. Very good. So yeah, they recorded it in 1975 with a 100-piece symphony orchestra and choir. So it was a big deal, apparently on the first take. So nice work there. And then the label heard it and said, oh, we want to put this out as a single. And he said, well, it was supposed to be a serious ELP album track, but they're like, nope, we got to make this a single. And it came out under Greg's name alone. And the public loved it, rocketed up the charts. Daily sales figures were astronomical. The only song to outsell it was Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody.
Wow.
Which is kind of interesting. Okay. So it's kind of become a classic. Here's Greg Lake with Ian Anderson and some other accompanists performing this song. St. Bride's Church in London in 2011. Let's go ahead and take a look at this.
I believe in Father Christmas, and I'm delighted to welcome as a special guest tonight to help them to sing it. Greg Lake, who wrote the song, Ian Anderson, David Arch, and Florio O'Connor.
They said there'll be snow at Christmas, and they said there'll be peace on earth, but instead it just kept on raining, a veil of tears for the virgin birth. But I remember one Christmas morning, a winter's light and a distant choir, and the peal of a bell, and that Christmas tree smell, and their eyes full of tinsel and fire. They sold me a dream of Christmas, and they sold me a silent night, and they told me a fairy story till I believed in the Israelite. And I believed in Father Christmas, and I looked to the sky with excited eyes. Then I woke with a yawn in the first light of dawn, and I saw him and through his disguise. I wish you a hopeful Christmas, and I wish you a brave new year. All anguish, pain, and sadness, leave your heart and let your load be clear. They said there'd be snow at Christmas, they said there'd be peace on earth. Hallelujah, Noel, be it heaven or hell, the Christmas we get we deserve.
All right, so what did you think, Adrian?
Well, that last line was pretty darn profound. The Christmas you get, you deserve. It sounds like what was important about Christmas, family, a spiritual holiday, the wonder and everything, has been largely replaced by a financial hype and a nightmarish degree of marketing and commercialization.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Adrian, and I think that's kind of what he was getting at. They say there'll be snow at Christmas. Instead, it kept on raining. Veil of tears for the virgin birth. And then they sold me a dream of Christmas, told me a fairy story, I looked at the sky with excited eyes, then woke with a yawn in the first light of dawn, saw through the disguise. And then went on to say, well, I wish you a hopeful Christmas and a brave new year, and pain and sadness leave your heart. Hallelujah, Noel, be it heaven or hell, the Christmas we get we deserve. Wow.
Yeah, see what I mean?
Yeah, so perhaps what he's getting at there is, whatever your reasons for Christmas, the more pure they are, the better it's likely to be. So with that in mind, I'd like to listen now to Ian Anderson talk about this. It's a real short clip. It's like a minute.
Okay.
Greg Lake, who I remember talking to a little bit back in 1995, became a real buddy in the years just before he died. He actually asked me to appear with him at a church in London at Christmas. And subsequently he did a couple of my cathedral shows. 2 or 3 years later, he played at Canterbury Cathedral in the year of the huge snowstorms at Christmas, and also at Salisbury Cathedral, not so far away from where he lived. I felt the loss of Greg quite keenly. Even to this day, some years later, I still perform the song that we did with Greg, his I Believe in Father Christmas song, which he did with us. God bless Greg and his particularly fine rendition of I Believe in Father Christmas, which I always hated. Thought it was the most tacky, silly Christmas song ever, until I actually had to study it, listen to the lyrics, learn the song, and I thought, this is a really good Christmas song. Once you get inside the lyrics and realize what it's about, wow, it's a song that I think I find it very easy to relate to.
Well, I was glad to hear that Ian Anderson has played the Father Christmas song a couple times, even without Greg. I'm sure it would be with Greg's blessing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it would be. And I'll be honest, the first time I even heard of the existence of this song, my eyes rolled a little bit, But then I gave it a listen. I'm like, well, okay, there's something not typical about this one. It's not just a cash-in, it's not just a Christmas song for Christmas so that we can sell a single. Although it's sold, it's yeah.
Yeah, it's about selling Christmas, or how people have started selling Christmas.
Yeah.
That makes any sense.
Which was not Greg Lake's intent, it sounds like, from the beginning. It was the record label that said, hey, ironically, let's make a single of this and put it out at Christmas, Yeah,
it sounded like Greg was kind of reluctant about that.
It makes sense when you think about it, when you know all of this, right? So, okay, well, so with all that here, let me just... I do have one more thing I'd like to play, and it's a similarly short clip of Greg talking about this song.
I Believe in Father Christmas has become something of a sort of a Christmas classic, which I'm very happy to say. It's a nice thing. It brings sometimes some strange reactions, people saying it's anti-religious and all of this, when in reality it was really about... objecting to the commerciality of Christmas and trying to sort of remind people basically that the Christmas you get, you deserve. It's all about giving, and it's the joy of giving. And that was the real intention behind the song.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, seems to jibe with everything else that we've kind of concluded regarding this song. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll admit, after studying this a little bit, I like the song better. I never minded the song itself. Just the idea of a modern artist writing a Christmas song, it just gives me automatic pause, regardless of whatever the merits are of it. But I think in this case, his heart was in the right place. Mm-hmm. And it turns out quite a number of people have covered this song, by the way. This was covered by Susan Boyle, Robbie Williams, Marillion. Let me see who else here. We've got Toya Wilcox, Elaine Page, Honeymoon Suite, Sarah Brightman, U2.
U2.
Yeah, Vertical Horizon. So, yeah, quite a number of people have done this one.
Yeah, I have to say, since doing this show, my attitude about such a song is very different.
Yeah.
I had the same idea as everybody else at first. When I first heard about this, it's like, what's Greg Lake doing a Christmas song? But this was well done.
Yeah, agreed. Really enjoyed it. So, okay, that was pretty cool. Just kind of checking out what Greg was up to, particularly with this song, because this is the song that I always had the most questions about, really, in his career. It was interesting to hear him talk about pictures at an exhibition as well, and we might just cover that someday on the channel, so don't be surprised if it happens. And Adrian, you always owned that one, but I never really knew about it. Apparently, I mean, I got a bunch of your records recently and was going through them, and I found it in there.
Oh, yeah, I found the ELP album in there, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was their second album, right? It was a live album. It sounds like maybe, I'm kind of wondering if the performance on that album is the same one that Greg was talking about in that clip, you know, where Emerson just said, hey, let's do pictures at an exhibition. And they're like, huh? and so they did.
Oh, I hope they recorded that.
Yeah, well, I mean, regardless, the one on the album is really good. And
That's pretty cool.
And of course, it's worth mentioning the stellar work Greg did with King Crimson. I mean, that first album, that debut album, I mean, it's one of my favorite albums of all time.
Same here. I think it's one of the greatest albums ever made.
And it makes sense to me that they worked the way they did. It was nice to get some insight into their thinking in trying to create music that was original and yet people would still listen to, you know.
Reach people, yeah.
Yeah, and they did that. So as mentioned, Greg's birthday is on November 10. This year he would have been 77. We're just going to remember him. I think I'm going to pull out my Tarkus album and play it. You know?
I think I'll do the same thing.
Yeah, and maybe even pictures at an exhibition. Maybe we're ripe for checking that out at some point in the future on the channel.
Yeah.
Well, so folks, why don't you let us know what you thought of all this and how familiar you are with Greg Lake's legacy in music. If there's anything in particular that you like the most that he did, that he worked on, all that information would be welcome. Also, let us know if you ever saw him and in what band. And if he had an impact on your life, let us know about that too. I'm sure that you will hear more from us on ELP on this channel. And of course, we have several reactions already up. If you're taking a look through our videos, you'll be sure to find them. Just do a search. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you enjoyed our presentation, please subscribe. All right. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next one. All right. Take care, folks.
See you all later.